My name is Rahwa Ghirmatzion, and I'm a senior policy fellow at the Just Solutions Collective. My background is in addressing issues on the front lines of EJ communities at the intersections of racial, economic, and environmental justice. And the solutions that I've been working on are community-led, community-designed, and community-produced policies. So I was born in Asmara, Eritrea, which at the time that I was born was in the middle of a civil war. So my family was displaced from my home country. We had to flee in the middle of the night, and we were able to get asylum status originally in Sudan. And while we were there, we went through the immigration process and we were resettled to Western New York. Buffalo, for a little bit of context, is third poorest city. It was a highly segregated city, even more segregated than it is on the west side of Buffalo, where I've done most of my work and lived. My mom was a single mother of 5 children. I learned a lot about housing and energy burdens when we were children, because sometimes we would have the gas turned off because my mother couldn't afford to pay the rent and the very, very expensive utility bills, sometimes more than the rent we were paying. And so once in a while, she would have to make a decision of, am I going to have heat, or am I going to have lights, or am I going to put food on the table? And so those are the experiences that I grew up with. And as I got older, I, really got to understand these issues that were happening not just to us, but to many of our neighbors. There was this theater company that I was volunteering for, and they asked me to come work for them. But this theater company is not like other theater companies. They didn't do theater for theater's sake. They were practicing political activism and seizing our culture and our storytelling and owning our the rights to our production, right? So really seizing the ownership of producing theater for oppressed people to talk about all these issues that affected us, and that was around gender and gender violence, reproductive rights. We talked from a global framework. Our goal, our purpose was that we were building the beloved community. And we define the community as the world, but what we can affect is right in front of us. So in Buffalo, New York, the most oppressed group happened to be African Americans or Black people. And so a lot of our plays spoke to that history. But we did have a global framework in that we partnered up with this amazing organization in South Africa and brought them here twice, actually, to talk about apartheid and the similarities of that and the legacy of slavery, and also the loss of indigeneity and indigenous practice in this country and land back. And we did all kinds of other things, like we work with the indigenous community. We incubated the first feminist lesbian theater company. We incubated the first Latino theater company that still exists today called Raíces, and did those issues. And really where I got politicized, where I learned about intersectionality, where I learned about being in deep practice was at that theater company. So we did a lot of devised theater, or what we people call theater of the oppressed. And in the early 2010 or so, we started to see a huge influx of immigrants and refugees, all coming from all over the world. I was asked to come and speak and to be the immigrant voice, which I thought was really funny. I'd been in this country for over 30 years, and you would never know I was an immigrant had you not seen my funny name. And so the hospital, local children's hospital, asked me to come and speak, and I got to learn about the issues at their Schwartz round around how do we work in maternal care and work with our immigrant and refugee women, because there were so many cultures and languages and all kinds of other barriers. And so after that, I was like, oh, you know what? We can use theater to help address this issue that our local hospital is having. And so one of the things that we wanted to showcase is that immigrants are not monolithic. So we had 7 women, all mothers, all who, some had come just 6 months prior, some had been here for 10, 14 years, some had been here for just a few years. We just had a whole host of women. And so we paired the women and their families up with our playwright, our resident playwright, and we worked with an organization called the Community Health Worker Network of Buffalo. And so they came on as our technical assistance provider, and then we worked with the University of Buffalo to help us design a survey for all of the attendants. And we targeted for our primary audience people that worked in hospitals. And so we ran it for several weeks, actually. We did it in church basements. It was very, very simple. How we designed it was we had cafe tables, and it looked like, the women would come and sit in the different cafes, and we'd have a community health worker interview them to tell us about their story. What brought them to America? Who were they? So, of course, the medical community was like, I learned more watching this production than anything else that I've done. It gave me a lot of tools to be able to better address the clients that we are serving, right? Other things that we learned about were the surveys. We were able to share them and did several mini case studies around them that actually helped to do some policy development around language and cultural access. Then the thing that we did not expect, was not part of our original thinking, was many of the participants, they would come with, some of them with their whole family. So you see grandma, grandpa, babies, everybody in tow, husbands, and that they created a community for themselves. And I'll never forget our Somali woman who had a translator. She had not been here very long, and her translator let us know she was very nervous to use some of her English, which she then practiced on stage, but that she would be calling some of the other women who had been there longer and understood what that feeling was, that she would practice her English with them. I had another woman who was from Iraq. She says, I didn't like Buffalo. It was very cold. It's so different than my home country. And how she got here was she was actually a professional in her home country, but because of the war, the American war on Iraq, and she became an interpreter, she had to leave once the troops were leaving because her life was going to be threatened. And so she didn't want to leave her home country, but she was here. And what she didn't like about Buffalo was that it was just too cold and she wasn't finding community. But through the process of that play, that production, she found community and she wanted to stay. My work at Ujima led me to do public health work because I wanted to more than just to have a political understanding and then just do education and awareness and give people a platform with which to speak with. It just didn't feel like it was enough, like it was doing enough things. So I really wanted to understand policy more and how we pass some of these policies that were very much needed in our community, and to do it in a way that the people that needed to benefit from it, the people that were asking for it, were at the center of it, but also that it was relevant and can be accessed by them. And then from doing that public health work, it led me to Push Buffalo. When I got to Push Buffalo, what I really loved about their work was that they would engage residents through an organizing strategy. And then they would organize the people and then help to write the policies that were needed. And then as soon as those policies were won, they knew how to draw down the money and actually turn them into economic development opportunities that were changing the material conditions on the ground for the people. And I just love that model. I brought with me my work of integrating arts even into the community development aspect of the work that we do. We always started to integrate telling people stories and how they tell their stories so that they were really, really powerful. Because one of the things that I brought from Ujima and that Push always practiced is that the people who are closest to the problem have the best solutions. And how we created really dynamic campaigns is that we didn't just want people to, in a vulnerable way, share this story about themselves that was, I'm needy, not from a needy perspective, but to say, there are systems in place that have created so much inequality that are still playing out today, both historical and current, that do not allow for the kind of dignified living around having basic human needs being met. When we heal the people, we heal the planet. When we heal the planet, we heal the people. And, and that is important in Buffalo, the context of Buffalo, because we had industrialization that left our land heavily polluted. We have the second oldest housing stock, and because of mass population loss and white flight, and Robert Moses highways that then, really broke up our neighborhoods that had a much more cohesive, beautiful, boulevard connecting us. All those things went away. So in order to repair those harms, it is important that we center our policies by centering the people that are being negatively impacted by them. If other cities or other communities, I think those are some real takeaways that they can learn from Buffalo, is we have to address the social conditions in our neighborhoods and in ways that we are centering the impacted people to be the solutionaries. I think what is needed is always comprehensive neighborhood by neighborhood planning, because you want each neighborhood to be able to name for itself what are their priorities, what is important to them, what do they want to see. I would say that kind of infrastructure would benefit any community. Not to have like this very sort of like big wand, silver bullet types of ideas. That never works. I think a better world is a journey to get there. If I were to be there now, I think it would look like holistic frameworks, really leaning into wholeness, being in right relationship, having deep democracy and engagement, and that the people are the ones who are making the decisions. Oftentimes, some of the solutions that we are getting to are not about profit making. They are about having healthy, resilient communities. I believe in deep civic engagement, but that's where I think the co-governance, the co-design, and the co-production comes from. And then that way it's less divisive, and we all get to understand how hard it is to practice that and to be in practice of that, but that we all have a role and responsibility. I think it gives everyone an opportunity to give input to the solutions.